Without further ado, this is Jeffrey Bell.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Everyone can hear me okay? Awesome. Let me have a quick sip of water. Awesome. So I hope everyone's had a great conference so far. It's Sunday, so of course it's everyone good? You can hear me? Okay, perfect. It's Sunday, so of course it's the best day, last day. Everyone should be heading home pretty soon. But like Matthew said, my name is Jeffrey Bell, and today I'll be speaking on repercussions from the absence of threat actor taxonomy. So who am I? Who is speaking to you today? All great questions. Like I said, my name is Jeffrey Bell. I'm a senior information security analyst and CTI lead for a pharma intelligence solution provider. I attended UNC-Charlotte. I have my BS in computer science, and I specialize in cybersecurity there. I currently live in Wilmington, North Carolina. I love to ski, hike, and run in my free time. That's actually a picture of me in West Virginia skiing. And I write for my blog, catchingphish.com. I actually kind of wrote a draft of this speech around 6 months ago, and I posted it on my blog. So if you want to see the original kind of reporting on this, definitely check that out. So what's the big deal? Why am I up here talking to you today? So if you don't mind just raising your hand if you've ever heard of any of these threat actors. APT-29, Iron Ritual, Iron Hemlock, Noble Baron, Dark Halo, Stellar Particle, Nobelium, UNC-2452, UNC-3524, Midnight Blizzard, Cozy Duke, Cozy Bear. Awesome. Okay, I saw some names. If you didn't kind of get the ruse that we were going with, these are all the same threat actor. Just refer to different classifications regarding on the threat research provider that does it. We're going to refer to them as TRPs as the presentation goes on, but I just wanted to kind of give that great example. So, what's the big deal? Like I said, threat actors currently are tracked without a uniform naming standard, which creates complexities, 1, to accurately accumulate indicators of compromise, and 2, to map their tactics and techniques. We're going to refer to this as TTPs. And we're going to look to MITRE ATT&CK for an open source solution to this issue. If you're not familiar with MITRE ATT&CK, it's a knowledge base where researchers, academics, threat research providers can kind of come together and really map out what threat actors do as they kind of move across your network. So, types of threat actors, I have an asterisk here to remind myself everyone in this room is incredibly smart, and you know that there's not just 3 types of threat actors. So that's why we have this great asterisk here, because we have insider threats, we have lone wolves, of course, but these are 3 buckets that I think are most appropriate to kind of gauge our discussion today. Our first, let's look at a criminal threat actor. Their motive is purely financial. Their target is any industry that could pay a ransom, has money that can be stolen or exfiltrated. An example actor of this would be Scattered Spider, probably the most famous criminal threat actor. You might have seen their Super Bowl commercial. You might have seen them as the perpetrator of the MGM attack in Las Vegas. Next, let's move on to our state-sponsored or nation-state threat actor. Their motive is either geopolitical or financial. Their target industry would be anything that's corporate, research, government, industrial control systems, or even nonprofits they can attack. An example of this would be GRU Unit 29155. CrowdStrike refers to them as Ember Bear. Now, let's move on to our hacktivist, our final threat actor. I like to call them the ramen threat actor. You might see them drinking Mountain Dew, as some people might refer to, in their parents' basement. Obviously, they're much more complicated than this, but let's give a gross oversimplification. Their motive here would be either social or political, and their target industry is really surrounding what their problem with a said organization is. If it's a religious organization, maybe they have a problem with their affiliation. If it's an individual, Brian Krebs, maybe they have an issue with the reporting in the past. An example of this would be SeedSec. If you're following the 2024 election, the conservative think tank Heritage Foundation was targeted by SeedSec, and SeedSec released a bunch of information. It prompted a backlash from the Heritage Foundation founder. It was a really mess. So let's look at a case study. Let's say we're all here in a SOC right now. So obviously, SOCs don't really look like this anymore. Everyone's in their pajamas working from home. But let's pretend that for this example, we were all in a SOC. So we're starting to see on our heat map behind me different indicators of compromise related to firewall logs. So we're starting to see some really suspicious IP addresses, and we're doing a little open search on Google, and we're starting to see threat blogs, articles that refer to a threat actor named Kumsuki. So we're starting to gather. One team in our SOC is going to go through all these articles and try to start finding similar indicators of compromise that might lead to kind of a larger discussion. Okay, maybe they're not just going to go over a firewall. Maybe there's some emails that they might start sending. What are some domains, that kind of stuff. But what we're seeing is as we're starting to gather all of these threat blogs and threat articles, we're starting to see different names referenced. And we're actually going to make a spreadsheet of that. And we're just going to kind of put the link in there. We're going to say, okay, I think their Kumsuki is actually called Cerium. Okay. We're going to keep going with all of those links. And we're actually going to get 16 names referred to this one threat actor. No joke, actually 16 names are referred to this one threat actor. We have everything from COVID variants, osmium, cerium, Connie. We have numbers, we have letters, we have monsters. Just a complete ununiform system for threat actor taxonomy. So how does this happen? Great question. So here on this slide, we have a threat actor. Let me see if I can move this. So here on the slide, we have a threat actor, and we also have our threat research providers. CrowdStrike, Unit 482, Mandiant, Microsoft Threat Intelligence, and Recorded Futures. Just some kind of big players in this space. So all of them are doing incredible stuff with incident response engagements. They're doing incredible stuff with threat hunting, the telemetry they ingest. So it's pretty likely that throughout all of these foresaid things, they're going to see our threat actor. However, as we start seeing, they're going to see different parts of this threat actor. CrowdStrike is going to observe, hey, we found some infrastructure, maybe some servers, mail servers, domains that have been registered, IP addresses. Great. So they're seeing a part of our threat actor. Now here we come, Unit 42 is going to see a little different part of this. So they're going to see maybe no infrastructure, but maybe they're going to see just domains that were registered. And maybe they're going to see, okay, they're going to use this kind of software. They're going to use Cobalt Strike. They're going to use Brute Ratel, all of this kind of different stuff. And now Mandiant's saying, hey, actually Unit 42, we found that they're using Cobalt Strike too, but we also found all these different domains and even some infrastructure they're standing up. Microsoft Threat Intelligence is going to say, we pretty much found exactly what you found. And Recorded Future is going to say, that was not a diss on Microsoft, I promise. It just overlapped perfectly. And Recorded Future is going to say, hey, we found this as well. Looks like very different stuff, maybe some different infrastructure, stuff like that. The problem here is none of these threat research providers are talking to each other. So everyone's seeing a different part of our threat actor, but they're not talking to each other to see the whole picture of our threat actor, which obviously creates a huge problem. Now let's get even more complicated. Now they're going to go up with their already biased, siloed information, and they're going to try to classify this threat actor. CrowdStrike is going to use an animal name. Unit 42 is going to use a constellation plus a word. Mandiant's going to use an abbreviation. Even for financial or criminal, they're going to use FIN to refer to. Microsoft's going to use natural disasters and weather. And Recorded Future is going to use the most confusing, a color and a name. Like Red Delta, for example, would be one example. So we can see Russia is referred to as Bear, Ursa, Blizzard, and Blue, all on this slide. So, and this is just 5 of the players. There's many more here. Talos, IBM, a lot of different companies are classifying things in different ways. So, why is our naming system like this? Great question. So, Falcon starts tomorrow, which is CrowdStrike's conference, and you're going to see on LinkedIn giant supervillain, grotesque mannequins that are supposed to represent threat actors. This is super important because if I'm attending that conference and I'm looking for a threat research provider for my company, I'm going to go with whatever kind of I think a big player is, and that creates that allure of darkness and mystery. So that's super memorable. When I leave that conference, I come home and I say, I remember that really scary mannequin that looked like a Halloween decoration. I think that's who my threat research provider should be. And secondly, commercialization and competition. Threat research providers are huge business, and there's a giant aversion to share any information that may facilitate the grouping of actors in one naming convention. Obviously, this intellectual property is super valuable. A ton of money is coming to this stuff, so there's really no indication that there needs to be any kind of sharing. So let's be realistic. I would love to just war room this and we all come up with a great naming standard in this room and then we publish it and nothing happens because threat research providers are private companies and they're not going to develop our perfect RSTCON approved naming standard. And some threat research providers have built their entire brands around their taxonomy. Scared Spider, for example, CrowdStrike, it was in a Super Bowl commercial. I don't think they're going to listen to us in this room. And like I said before, threat research providers are not incentivized to share common intellectual property with each other, apart from open source reporting. One kind of caveat to this I'd like to bring up is the Snowflake breach that happened earlier this year. We saw Mandiant and CrowdStrike, very rare. You don't usually see two incident response engagements kind of come together, but this was brought in by Snowflake. They didn't come together and say, hey, I think we can really team up on this. They were brought in and paid handsomely by Snowflake. So, if you have a threat research provider, awesome. Utilize their naming convention. If I record future, I'm going to use their color and their word. I'm going to use Red Delta, for example. If I have Unit 42, I'm going to use their constellation. And you want to observe specific threat actors. So if I'm in manufacturing, I want to look at what threat actors might be targeting manufacturing. A caveat to this, of course, is that a lot of criminal threat actors are opportunistic. They're going to go after a certain vulnerability and whoever they can target. However, we see kind of breaks from this. A ransomware group named Chilin actually vowed in one of their recent data leak sites that they're going to start attacking healthcare. So this is kind of a trend away from the normal day-to-day opportunistic. And then, of course, our nation-state actors, our state-sponsored actors, it's a different game. And if they want your company, they'll play the long game in trying to get that. So we're going to also monitor prolific ransomware variants. This is huge because of the ransomware as a service. This is huge because of ransomware as a service. So let's say I just created an incredible ESXi encryptor. I'm a ransomware operator. Actually, maybe I can even create an encryptor for Mac. So I have some choices. I can either kind of create my own threat actor group and kind of piecemeal this out and, hey, let's go attack one company, and then next week let's try to go attack another company. But I'm trying to make money. I just spent 6 months in my mom's basement creating this variant. So I'm going to make sure that I can make as much money as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize that ransomware as a service. So I'm going to look for affiliates. They call them pen testers in kind of the dark web landscape. So I'm going to look for pen testers, affiliates, who want to use my variant, and I'm going to get a percentage of that. And I even bring this point up because ransomware variants fall and rise. So if I'm an affiliate, I'm just looking to make money, right? So if a ransomware variant is under governmental or police scrutiny, like Lockbit was earlier this year, I'm going to splinter as a threat actor. I'm not going to stay with Lockbit because that just risks me getting caught myself. So a lot of times you're seeing threat actors now that are part of this ransomware as a service model keep spares in their back pockets of different ransomware variants. And the minute they see some kind of data leak site that has gone down or even some internal chatter of some governmental intervention, they're going to split and they're going to stop using that ransomware variant. So that's why, to my next point, it's super important to regularly update the threat actors that you track because groups rise, fall, combine. So we have to make sure we stay updated, either biannually or quarterly at a very bare minimum, depending on your team's resources. And we're also going to follow other threat research providers' blogs to fill in blind spots. If I'm using Unit 42, I want to make sure that the threat actors I'm tracking, I have Google alerts or something like that. So if CrowdStrike posts something that is referred to in my Rosetta Stone as a threat actor I'm tracking as part of my Unit 42 classification or taxonomy, I want to make sure I'm hearing that to fill in those blind spots. And finally, ask your threat research provider if they share with MITRE ATT&CK. This is huge. We're going to kind of touch on MITRE ATT&CK in a second, but it's so important that they're sharing with MITRE ATT&CK because all of these threat research providers incorporate MITRE ATT&CK matrix into their own framework, into their own threat intelligence, and it's only fair for them to share with MITRE ATT&CK. If you don't have a threat research provider, not a big deal. It's not the end of the world like it used to be. You can leverage information sharing organizations like ISACs. You can look at open source reporting, free quarterly reports from a lot of threat research providers, and MITRE ATT&CK, of course. So let's kind of talk about MITRE ATT&CK. So MITRE ATT&CK is awesome, like I keep saying. And in MITRE ATT&CK, they actually classify threat actors, not with a different naming convention. They kind of use the ones that have already existed. But they kind of create some type of Rosetta Stone where we can see, okay, Scatter Spider, and we can also see all the groups that are different names for Scatter Spider at least. So let's click on Scared Spider, and let's see a nice little summary about them. We see those associated group descriptions. So even if you're tracking with Microsoft's or Storm 0875, I couldn't even tell you what vendor that is. It might be outdated. Now you can say, okay, perfect. I have my little Rosetta Stone, and I can say, okay, Scared Spider might be called this, but in reality, I'm tracking it as this, and it's covered. Unfortunately, what I circled here, last modified April 4th, 2024. Now, it is September, and Scared Spider has not stopped. They took a little bit of a break during the summer, but they're back, and this information is now 5 months old. And that's because this stuff is not getting regularly updated at the frequency in which it should. So if we keep going down that page, we're going to see something awesome called techniques used. So MITRE, through all of its kind of collection efforts, open source, all of that kind of stuff, is able to kind of map out some of the activities that Scared Spider performs. For example, we see the ID here, we see T1087, we see the sub-technique 0.002, account discovery domain account. So Scared Spider is going to leverage legitimate domain accounts to gain access to that target environment. Awesome. So that's really valuable, and if we click on that ID, even that sub-technique, MITRE is going to say, hey, here's some mitigations you can take, here's some detections you can build into your SIM, some event logs to look at, all that kind of stuff depending on your team's resources. Perfect. And what you're going to see when you click on that ID is Scared Spider isn't the only threat actor compromising via account discovery domain accounts. So you're going to be able to knock out a lot of threat actors by just kind of closing and placing those mitigating controls regarding that technique, which is awesome. So let's look at this a little bit more pretty in attack navigator layers. So we're going to see here in attack navigator layers, we're going to see Scared Spider here, and we're going to see a beautiful kind of matrix of this. So let's see, we have reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, execution, persistence, the whole kind of picture. It's perfect. However, we see a lot of white. And it's possible that Scared Spider is only using these said techniques, but is it likely? Perhaps. Let's look at initial access, for example. Spear phishing voice. Kind of what makes Scared Spider is that they call up your IT help desk, say, hey, just got a new phone. I need you to reset my MFA. And if we go over to persistence now, on the 5th down technique, device registration. So through that, I was able to get initial access and also persistence. Perfect. So imagine there wasn't all this white space, because Scared Spider can also say, hey, they know we're doing vishing. I can see this in this matrix. Let's stop doing vishing. Let's go to spear phishing links or something like that, a more traditional phishing approach. So imagine we had a matrix that actually incorporated blind spots. Look at a matrix like this, filled with a bunch of threat research providers, your Mandiant, your CrowdStrike, Microsoft, actually bragging about how much they're contributing to MITRE. We already had the matrix in place. It's right here. There's just a lack of actual threat research providers providing the information that they're seeing. I'm not saying they need to provide the exact IOC or hash that they're seeing, but at least we need to start understanding the blind spots that exist in all of these kind of frameworks. So imagine this. Every different threat research provider has their own color. They can brag about how much they're uploading, like I said. And also, let's look at vulnerabilities under resource development. Vulnerabilities is a large, there's just a lot of overlap there, right? So we can have different colors like gray or something if a lot of threat research providers are providing information regarding vulnerabilities. So it can be very useful. Okay, some key takeaways. Hopefully I've drilled this in enough. Threat actor taxonomy is a mess, but investing in MITRE yields centralized mapping across threat research providers. Right now, as Blue Team, we're behind. We chose to invest in different naming structures, and as a result of that, we're seeing fragmentation across the threat actor taxonomy landscape. Thank you so much. I don't know what time it is, but 5 minutes, okay. Here's my LinkedIn if you want to ask me any questions after this, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions now. I must have done a really good job. That's very, very impressive. Thank you.